Well, a lot of people are excited about their liberties, and I want to spend some time just talking about the fun in Europe and how their different liberties are going and so on. But I do know that we have a raffle, and we have some books to sell, and we need to take just a short stretch. So what I want to do is, I think I got 20 more minutes or something to talk, but I know that the scholarship program is going to raise some money with the raffle, so if you want to buy any more raffle items, then they're going to raffle off all these goodies over there. And then the local bookstore has the Travel as a Political Act book over there. I think it sells for about $20 including tax, and here it's even $15 including tax. Okay, so that's a very good discount. If you want to grab those, that would be great. Also, as I mentioned, in the back there's a Smithsonian magazine. I got to collaborate with the people at Smithsonian. It was so much fun. They wanted me to write my favorite top 20 places up. I just assumed I would use my photos, and they said, Rick, we'll take care of the art. And at first I was kind of, whoa, what? And then I realized what a thrill to have my favorite articles put together with wonderful Smithsonian photographs. So this sold out all over the country. I liked it so much I bought 50,000 extra copies, and I just give them away wherever I go. So please, one per family, but if you'd like one, I'd love for you to have that, and it highlights my favorite 20 places. And also, the biggest part of our business, I work with 80 people in Edmonds, just north of Seattle, and the hottest thing in our business is our tour program. As I mentioned, we had our best year ever this year. We took 11,000 people on 400 different tours, 30 different itineraries. They're all explained in here. If you're curious about our tour program, my sales director just told me this year's sales are actually a lot ahead, 1,000 seats ahead of last year's sales at this time. So there's a lot of people traveling, I'll tell you that. And she told me 52% of the people who have signed up so far for next year's tours are return customers. People have been with us before. Point is, it's a quirky kind of tour, but if it's right for you, it's really a great opportunity. Small groups, wonderful guides, our passion for Europe, lots of different itineraries. So that's back there. There's a DVD in here that gives you a good candid look at what our tour program's like. So go ahead, and if you want to do the raffle, get a book or pick up those freebies, that's cool. And we'll carry on in just about 6 or 7 minutes, okay?
Last year you said India was your favorite country to travel to. Did you say why?
India is my favorite country to travel. Well, it really humbles your ethnocentricity in a beautiful way. I really like to get out of my comfort zone, and all of us are kind of self-assured. I know what good music is, and then you go to India and you find people don't even recognize meter and what do you call it, mode. It's a whole different system of music, and at a glance, or whatever an audio glance is, it just doesn't sound very good. But when you realize it's just as beautiful and sophisticated as ours. So that really humbled me. India has different approach to time, to pain, to love, to music, to all sorts of stuff. And I just love I love it when people rearrange my cultural furniture, and then I get to figure out the lay of the land again. So in Europe, Italy, I think, is the closest thing to Italy, and that's my favorite country in Europe is Italy. But I'd love to go back to India, but I'm just focusing on Europe in my work. Yeah?
You do all this traveling around the world. How many languages do you know more than just a few, like hello, goodbye, thank you?
How many languages do I know? I only know English. That's why Ireland was so nice, as I mentioned, because I had the sensation of understanding a foreign language. It's nothing to brag about, but it does substantiate my teaching when I say that you don't need to be a linguist to travel. I've been able to make my TV shows, write my guidebooks, lead my tours, and have vacations all over Europe, regardless of where they speak English. And counterintuitively, the biggest language barrier you'll find is in the countries that have the most people speaking it, like Spain and Italy would have a bigger language barrier than Estonia or Hungary. Because if you're Estonian, there's only 1 million people on this planet that can talk to you, unless you speak another language. And if you're going to speak another language, if you're young and with it today, you're going to choose English. That's the language that gets you some distance. But if you're Italian or Spanish, and you speak Italian or Spanish, and that's it, you got a reasonable world to function in. That's my theory anyways. But I speak only English. Yes?
Thank you for remembering Spokane as part of your world. I appreciate you coming. I don't wish this upon you, but have you ever thought of running for president?
All I want to do politically is legalize marijuana in this state, okay? So, and you'll hear about that. In fact, I'll talk about that in a minute. But I would be so frustrated in Washington, D.C. right now, and I've got great respect for anybody who can put up with all of that and still not be disheartened. And I don't sit in meetings very well. I've got friends who are congresspeople and so on, and they're just so good. I think they know how it works, and I just don't. And I really feel like I am having so much fun doing this, and I can have an impact. We just, John just mentioned our little fundraiser for Bread for the World. Bread for the World, if you don't know what it is, it's the only lobby organization I know that speaks up for hungry and homeless people in the halls of Congress. I mean, it's quite amazing if you're a congressman and all you got is these people with their own interests coming in and hammering away at you, and you got to relent, you got to listen to them. And nobody's speaking up for homeless people, really. And Bread for the World does, and they do it very effectively. And right now, we're trying to balance the budget, I believe, to a certain degree on the backs of desperately poor people. And I want a fiscal responsibility and all that, but we don't need to make desperate people even more desperate. There's enough money in this country to have a certain threshold of decency when it comes to people who are frankly losers in the whole capitalism game, you know. Doesn't mean you got to be wretched like Charles Dickens' Tale of Two Cities or something like that. So, but just with our little initiative, just in the last 2 days, we've raised $50,000 to empower, basically to hire a couple of lobbyists to help teach Congress the fallout of their decisions on hungry people. So I can do a lot just through the fun of my own business, and I'm happy to do that. And this book is a fun way to talk. I get to talk to a bunch of neat people like you about these ideas that are really important to me. I mean, this is a real thrill to be able to come here and share all this. Yeah?
In the Smithsonian book, there's a page about small ship cruising. Have you done any small ship cruising in the European rivers?
I've never done any small ship cruising, and I would like to someday. I grew up in the San Juans, basically. I love boats. I have gotten into cruising, though, in the last year. We've got, one of my best-selling guidebooks is called The Rick Steves Guide to Mediterranean Cruise Ports. And it's a very fast-growing segment of the basic mainstream tourism industry in Europe. You got these huge cruise ships with 3,000 or 4,000 people on them all over the place. And I just decided I want to take some of the information I've already written, because all that information exists, retool it for the needs of cruisers, and cobble it together in a book that takes you from Barcelona to Istanbul. I just spent 20 days doing 2 cruises, that whole stretch. And I was ready to have a cynical attitude about it, but it was really good, you know. And on that cruise ship, I was on 2 different cruise ships. I figure both of them were sold out. There's about 3,000 tourists on each of them. To me, my own little assessment would be 1,000 of those 3,000 were just enjoying a floating Las Vegas. That was fine, and they're happy. And occasionally they go ashore and have a pizza. And 1/3 were pretty lazy tourists. They just wanted to see some famous things. And then 1/3 were real travelers that just wanted to move into one hotel and have one exciting day in each country for 7 days in a row. Nothing wrong with that. But I wanted to make a guidebook for those people, the travelers that hit the ground running as soon as that gangplank's down. And I just had a great time. And by the way, I've got a Facebook page, which I just love working on. It was called the blog of the year by the Society of American Travel Writers. And it's just, I get to take people with me when I'm making the TV shows, going on a cruise. I sign up for my tours. Every year I sign up for one of my tours if I can. And I signed up for my Turkey tour this year. It's really fun. I get letters from me when I sign up for one of my own tours. And I had a great 2 weeks in Turkey learning from one of our guides, and I got to report on it for 2 weeks in a row on the Facebook page. So if you're curious about that, the whole cruise thing, I have like 18 days in a row about my take on cruising on the Facebook. Yeah?
I don't do Facebook, but there was a story about how much weight you were going to gain on the
Yeah.
What was that? What was the
Oh, I just had a Facebook contest where, because I was pigging out for 16 or 18 days in a row, but I was exercising a lot, and I lost 1 pound over the experience. And I don't want to gain any weight. So, but we had an ethic of using the stairs instead of the elevators on the ship, which lasted for the first half of the whole experience. Yeah.
You have a Norway show where you visit family members in Norway. Do you have advice on finding family in other countries?
Do I have advice for finding family in other countries? I've found if you are from a certain country and you don't know who your relatives are, you can just get a phone book out and make up a name. Not really, but people love to meet you, you know. I mean, I had distant relatives that they didn't know who I was, and I came into town and I looked them up, and they were so excited to have somebody drop in on them. You can find out who your distant relatives are, send them an email somehow, let them know you're coming, and you can tell by their response whether they want you to come by or not. If they just say have a good time or whatever, you can take a hint. But chances are they're going to beg you to come by. And I've been visiting my relatives around Norway forever, and it's really, if you got relatives anywhere in your travels, it's a real bonus to look them up, for sure. Yeah.
When you say that,
I caught the notion that English was considered to be the universal language in Europe. Why would that be?
Why is English the universal language in Europe? Well, it's the popular language of popular culture. Our culture is really, English pop culture. It's the language of the internet. It's the language of international business. It's the language of India. That's 1 billion people. People in India all communicate from a business point of view, I believe, in English. If you're going to choose one language, Europeans want to learn a second language so they have a bigger world. And in the old days, you'd learn German or French or Russian. But now, in one generation, it's changed. So the dominant choice for second language would be English. It's not the right choice. Some people still learn Portuguese, and they go to Brazil a lot, and it's fine. But English really makes the most sense. If you go to the airport in Amsterdam, you'll find they've even dispensed with Dutch. They just say everybody speaks English. They'll just do signs in English. See, so if you're hiking in the Alps and you meet and a Greek meets a Norwegian, they will communicate in broken English. Think about it. What Greek speaks Norwegian? Greeks do connect with Norwegians, but they do it with a common language, which invariably would be English. One more question, anybody? Yes?
So I'm aware there's a growing anti-Muslim sentiment in Western Europe, especially because of the influx of Muslims. Have you experienced that in your recent trips over to Europe, and do you think this is a growing problem that will manifest itself in some way in the future?
Henry Kissinger thinks you should go to Europe now because in a generation it's all going to be Muslim. I've read that, and I think he's way off base. There's a Muslim minority in Europe is like the Hispanic minority or the Mexican minority in the United States, or the Hispanic minority. It's just rich countries import people from south of the border to do their dirty work. It's just a reality. And they bring their kids so they can get citizenship, and they have a culture that might have more faster birth rate than the other groups, and over time it becomes a bigger and bigger part of the society. And you bring them in for cheap labor, but it's not just that cheap. You have to provide for that, section of your society. And if you don't provide for it, well, you're going to have indirect costs for that cheap labor. We can see it here in our society, and it's a complicated issue. And in Europe, the equivalent of Spanish-speaking domestic labor is Muslims from northern Africa that come into Europe. Do I think it's going to be a big problem? I don't know. I think Europeans want to have everybody assimilate. My take on it is there's two kinds of immigrants. There are immigrants that come and want to assimilate and become Danes or Dutch or German, and there are immigrants that come and just want to squat in your sparsely populated, relatively affluent corner of the world and maintain their Algerian culture. Now, personally, I don't like the fact that there are families in the Netherlands that have been there for 3 generations and they speak no Dutch. And they have their own little enclave of Algeria, and they communicate with Algeria by satellite dishes and Skype and all that kind of stuff, which makes this kind of diaspora much easier these days. And that's a problem. On the other hand, you meet a cabbie in Berlin who's Turkish, and he's as German as the next guy. It's amazing how assimilated some of them are. And you go to Denmark. I went to the City Museum in Denmark, and a Pakistani woman who speaks Danish beautifully and knows the Danish culture and history like a person who's been there for many generations, took me out to the museum, and it was a beautiful experience because here is an immigrant who assimilated. You see, this is a political issue, and I'm glad I'm not a politician because you're probably damned if you do and damned if you don't when you talk about this thing. But 3 of my grandparents came over from Norway speaking only Norwegian. 2 generations later, all I can say is "Takk for maten," It's just, I don't know any Norwegian. Now that's a fast assimilation, isn't it? I'm still proud of my Norwegian heritage. We celebrate Christmas Norwegian style, and I'm a Lutheran, all right? That's what Norwegians do. But I've assimilated enthusiastically, and that's the kind of immigrant situation that I think works best. It's an interesting issue in Europe. It's a serious issue. And, I don't really feel like I'm an authority on it. I've talked to a lot of people in my books, for my books, and it's an interesting to pay attention to. But I don't think the sky is falling if you happen to be a a white supremacist in Europe, and you don't want everybody to be wearing scarves and hearing the call to prayer, you know. But they deal with it. In Spain, they just built a mosque in Granada, which is the most Muslim city in Spain. They just built a new mosque. The Muslim community wanted to have an amplified call to prayer. Allah, 5 times a day. And the community said, no, you can have a call to prayer, but it's got to be just one voice, not amplified. The Muslims dealt with it. It's cool. You see, they have to share that town. And it seems very, very good, the arrangement they've got. Okay.